Kellyanne Conway stands accused of violating the Hatch Act. The chair of the Federal Election Commission rebukes the president's comments about foreign intelligence, and a new poll finds the California Democratic primary is wide open.
Team Rising is here. James Hitchcock is an editorial assistant for the New York Times opinion section. Keneshia Grant is an assistant professor of political science at Howard University. 2013, she was appointed to work as a commissioner's special assistant at the United States Commission of Civil Rights. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great to have you both.
All right, let's start off a little bit with Kellyanne Conway. So Kellyanne, the special counselor to the president, was recommended by the office of the special counsel,
no relation to Mueller,
Robert Mueller, that she be removed from office for repeatedly violating the Hatch Act. Ms. Conway addressed this a couple of months ago at the White House. Let's take a listen.
The fact is I haven't been found in violation of the Hatch Act based on the 2020 election. We've got outside groups who have political agendas trying to file actions against me. It doesn't make it real. It doesn't even make it relevant.
And noteworthy, the President of the United States, who just spoke to Fox and Friends, said that he will not fire Kellyanne Conway at the recommendation of the Office of Special Counsel, saying, "It looks to me like they're trying to take away her right of free speech, and that's just not fair." Trump said of Conway, she's got the right of responding to questions. So I guess the real question, James, is about the validity of the Hatch Act itself. Does it make sense for political appointees to not be able to speak about politics? Now, a government bureaucrat, an IRS official, I think that is inappropriate. But a White House official, say?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the distinction here that's relevant is not talking about politics, but also not talking directly about elections and talking about actively sort of campaigning on behalf of candidates. And this is what's dogged her in the past. I think the sort of Trumpian response is in this high octane moment of domestic politics, is it really realistic that you can have other members of the executive branch sort of staying out of this? And
yeah.
The answer seems to be, at least for this era, no so far. What the consequences will be is still unclear.
Yeah,
I mean, Keneshia, that may be all well and good. Maybe the rule needs to change, but the rule is the rule as it is today. And
right.
Part of why they called her out is because they said she has a pattern of essentially repeated abuse. And if you let her just say whatever she wants, then what's to stop the IRS
Yes.
commissioner from saying whatever they want?
Right, and I think the particularly egregious part of this is doing it on the clock. So the Hatch Act doesn't say that political appointees can't have things to say about politics, but just don't do that while you're at work.
While you're in your official capacity.
And so she shows up repeatedly on TV in her capacity saying these things that she's not supposed to say. And so I think that's the problematic part of it. We don't want people to not have an opinion about politics.
Right.
Well, that's the real question, which is why, it really goes to the heart of cable messaging on the part of the White House and all White Houses really, which is floating people out there on inherently political shows to talk about policy. Maybe those things just don't blend very well. It really is better when a actual policymaker appears on, because then cable hosts will focus on the whatever policy substance of there is. But we have Kellyanne Conway on. She was campaign manager for Donald Trump. It would just be crazy. I think you'd be negligent in your own job not to ask her. But you're right. It is up to them to go
to
into
not
it
answer. She in theory is supposed to be doing the work of the people, not of a political operative.
Right.
And you would hope sophisticated enough to do both, right?
Yeah.
It should be the case that you can talk about your policy in a way that gets your political point across without being blatantly political, but we don't live in that world.
If there's one person who knows how to avoid a question and answer the question she wants to answer, it is Kellyanne Conway. But
I've questioned her myself, and I can confirm that.
That is definitely the case. I mean, I've known her for a long time.
Yeah.
From, cable news before Trump land, which has been funny to watch that evolution. But I mean, the other piece here is there's no accountability, because ultimately it's up to the president. So I mean, that's the other problem is it's irrelevant, any of the rules, any of the guidelines, if it's up to Donald Trump to enforce them.
We should also turn to the Federal Election Committee, Federal Election Commission. The chairwoman of the commission herself said, "I would not think that I would have had to say this, but let me make something 100% clear to the American public and anyone running for public office. It is illegal for any person to solicit, accept, or receive anything of value from a foreign national in connection with a U.S. election." This obviously coming after the president spoke to ABC News' George Stephanopoulos, saying that what did he say? He would call the FBI and he would consider foreign information.
He was a little sketchy on whether or not he'd call the FBI. This morning, he said he'd definitely look at it.
This morning he said, of course you give it to the FBI or report it to the Attorney General if it's bad. I think this entire thing is just strange, James, because it seems to be one of those obvious moments where it's like, yeah, you call the FBI. There's just no there's no real middle ground on it.
No, I think that there is an obvious response there. I think that the president enjoys being flippant with the press sometimes.
Right.
But this is also something you have to take very seriously. I mean, this is, as far as you can, and it's tough to, you have to also disentangle this just from the Trump-Russia stuff. Election, interference is going to be the future. It's a really dangerous thing, whether it's coming from Moscow, Beijing. Right. You've seen it, of course, with all across Europe the last few years as well, in terms of bolstering extreme sort of fringe parties.
Absolutely.
It's something you have to have sort of like a steady hand from the top. So
well, this is always the problem with Trump, right, Keneshia? Which is he's unable to separate the principle from the self-interest. So he literally cannot comprehend why this would be bad out of the context of himself. It has gotten him very far in life.
Right.
That's why many people voted for him for some crazy reason. That seems to be a very attractive figure, but I don't know what it is about that ability not to be able to separate the principle from the self-interest. Because if he hears foreign interference, all he hears is Russia, 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 which annoys the crap out of me too. I totally understand it. But I'm not sure where we're going with this. It just seems like we all agree here.
Yeah. I don't know why he has that inability either. Because I would think, given that he just went through all this stuff with Mueller, he would be like, yeah, sure, whatever you need, I got you. And recognize that this does look bad for him personally. So no, we're not asking whether you personally are not going to benefit if somebody brings you information, but it's just please, sir, take a moment and realize that we are doing a thing to protect American elections, and you should be doing a thing to protect yourself from these criticisms about Russia, if that's what you want to make this about.
Well, Crystal, you've been making that case about China, right?
Right. I mean, China could intervene in this election. It could be on behalf of Joe Biden, right? He's a lot softer on them than Trump is. They're clearly trying to wait Trump out for whoever's next. Is it crazy to think that they'd intervene on behalf of the Democrat? I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, James, the other thing that I was thinking about with this, though, is because Mueller didn't charge Don Jr. or anyone else for accepting a thing of value from a foreign country, which is illegal, as the FEC chair is pointing out, it has kind of created a public perception that it's not illegal. I mean, that's why they felt like they had to come out and say that, because it has created a public perception that, well, maybe what they did during the campaign was shady, but it wasn't illegal.
Yeah, I mean, this in the fact that this continues to drag on in terms of congressional proceedings, and this is not the news cycle has not ended with the publication of the Mueller report, and I think that's got to be just a total bugbear to to the Trump family at large. Doesn't seem like it's going to come to an end either in the near future.
I agree.
So there's a new LA Times poll of California. Of course, California has moved up in the schedule for primaries, so it's going to be really important. A lot of people are making the case that Kamala Harris was in a very good position because obviously she's the senator from California and it's early and it's got a lot of delegates. However, new poll has her in 4th place in her own home state. I mean, it's a pretty bad showing for Senator Harris. Meanwhile, you've got Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders in a tie for second. Some polls have Elizabeth Warren ahead of Sanders now. And in general, Keneshia, this race in California looks pretty wide open.
It does look pretty wide open. I'm not really very much stressed about Kamala Harris being in 4th at this point. I think that she is a senator from California, but now we have the opportunity to consider her with other people if you're from California. And many of the people in the poll rated her as their second choice.
Yeah, she did get a lot of second choice
Yeah,
votes.
so I think that's a good thing for her to have on her side and something that she can build on. But I would have hoped that she would come out at least kind of second in this race.
What I was really struck by is she was actually 3rd amongst black voters, and I think 3rd or 4th amongst Latinos. So even amongst the minority Democratic voters in California, she's not doing very well. And I think the real question, James, I would love your take on this, which is why is it that Elizabeth Warren seems to be ubiquitous across racial groups there and surging in California? What do you think that is?
I think it's two things. I think the first thing is having like a strong kind of clear message where even if you've not grasped or really looked into the policy specifics, you can recognize, Liz Warren has cultivated a reputation for herself as sort of an innovator on and really pushing on so many policy fronts. I think it's people are right to criticize sort of lane theory of primary politics, but I think when you look at everybody else who's in this poll, there's he or she is sort of defined for him or herself like a there's a reason to know them in effect. And I think Kamala's there's a combination of she's not. I think we've heard headlines basically of internally they're looking to sort of like regroup and sort of develop a new image. She's not. I don't think she's quite had a breakout moment. And we're so early into the primary.
Right.
Yeah,
Have another debate, et cetera, et cetera.
But since her sort of initial announcement speech, which was huge and it attracted a lot of attention, I don't think there have been quite as many sort of particular moments that people can look back to. And
I think people have a hard time saying exactly. I mean, to James's point, like Warren, you know what she's all about, right? Sanders, you know what he's all about. Biden has made it very clear he's all about like going back to the Obama years, right?
Let's put things back together. But he's the most recognizable figure of consensus politics.
Exactly.
So that's what the people who want that will go to.
But Senator Harris is a very appealing figure, but people don't necessarily put any particular sort of brand ideology thing with her yet.
Right. I think as a political scientist, I read this and dug into the notes.
Yeah.
And so if you read the notes, there's a note that says that they didn't talk to lots of black people. They talked to a small number of black people and extrapolated out that conversation.
Sample size always a problem.
The sample size was a problem in this instance. And so I wonder whether it's actually the case that she has problems with black voters. I'd be more interested to see a poll coming out of South Carolina where she spent a bunch of time and see what the black folks there are saying about whether they're going to support her and how they feel about it. But I think this point about us not really knowing what she is about, the I have a plan for that kind of thing is an important note. I think if she has something a bit more concrete for folks to grasp, she might be a little better positioned in the future.
Yeah, because when we see her, when we see her in the Senate questioning people, right? She's impressive. And so I could see her having a standout debate moment. But if I'm her campaign, I'm looking at these numbers, and this is a bad.
It's not great.
This is a bad day because this is supposed to be her trump card.
But the Bernie campaign also shouldn't be very excited about this.
Yeah.
I mean, this is an 18-17 split of two candidates who basically agree with each other on a lot of different things from policy. James, what is it about? And this is something we've been talking a lot about here. Crystal and I were both at Bernie's rally 2 days ago, defining himself as democratic socialist, anchoring democratic socialism distinctively in American context. But I've seen a great point from Lee Fang of The Intercept that maybe Elizabeth Warren, by using language like economic patriotism, which is more in line with the American character, is giving her own policies more of an electable boost that is something that's more acceptable to the American voter.
I think Zaid Jilani also made a very similar point. It was in reference to Sanders' recent sort of this rally that you just mentioned about democratic socialism and defining what it is. And I think his sort of point was, why are we having rallies devoted to just this term and explaining the term? It feels very sort of small, relative to this sort of, opening up the political imagination in terms of putting out these big plans and, really stuff that's at once, leads headlines, but also offers sort of a meatier, amount of policy and amount of stuff for voters to grasp onto, rather than not debating, but working to define so intensely what a term is and whatnot. So I think she's really nailed, going out, making herself into this candidate who's known for putting these, really detailed briefs out that are taking on sort of head-on big problems in American politics right now.
She's running a great campaign. Like that's the bottom line. We talk to Sanders people who say she's hired great staff, right? She has a massive burn rate, Elizabeth Warren does, but it seems like that investment is paying off, and she's been in the public eye a long time. She's good at what she does.
Yeah, I think that this is interesting because Bernie Sanders has run for president, right? This is Elizabeth Warren's first time out. And so that she could be competing with him at this level at all or surpassing him in this poll, I think is very noteworthy. And if I'm on the Sanders campaign, I'm worried about this.
Well, it's not that's the thing. It's not Bernie v. Hillary anymore. He doesn't have that convenient figure in order to go back against. He actually has to fight against somebody who generally believes everything he believes and might actually just be a better tactician and a better candidate.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch it unfold.
Yeah, I think he should be better suited to have these conversations, though, right? He has already been through a campaign where he had to explain these things, and it's her first time out the gate explaining things to the American public. So I would think that he would be better positioned to get people excited, and it seems like that's not the case.
We will see.
Thank you both so much.
James, thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Coming up, Sarah Sanders is dropping the mic. Air Force One's newest paint job is getting some negative feedback.
And the Treasury Secretary's wife, Louise Linton's apology tour, is not exactly going as it is intended. We will explain before we go.